We live forward, but we understand backward. That little quote from philosopher Soren Kierkegaard fairly well sums up the human dilemma, I think. We live forward, but we understand backward. The existentialist philosophers, beginning with Kierkegaard, were attempting to get at something that Buddhists had already been wrestling with for about 2,500 years. The problem is this: we human beings do a good bit of ruminating about our pasts or worrying about the future, but we find it difficult to focus on the only time that we can actually control, which is right now. That's why I've titled my talk today, So Here We Are. I want to talk about now. A later existentialist philosopher, the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, tried to get at that odd feeling we have when we consider where we are in this moment. Heidegger named the feeling Geworfenheit, thrownness. Thrownness. It's the feeling that we're here, but we don't really know where here is, and we don't know what to do right now. That feeling can produce anxiety, and it can be debilitating. That's why William Stafford said in the poem I just read, "Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread." The question is, what's your thread? Because it is a choice, anxiety, or alternatively, we can thrill in the expectation of what's next. That's the theme for the month of September, expectation. This morning I want to consider three things that we've got going on here now. And first, what is our part in the existential situation of the United States? Second, what is humanism in this moment? And third, what's happening here at First Unitarian Society? So, here we are. We're beginning the 138th year of congregating as First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis. And we begin our 103rd year of this experiment called congregational humanism. We're here right now, and as all nows feel, that can be disturbing. It feels as if we've been thrown in the middle of something, but we don't quite know what that something is. What should we be doing? Well, let's understand backward for a moment. When this congregation began our experiment in humanism, back in 1916, the world was in the midst of the bloodiest war yet seen in human history. Some of the young people sitting in the pews would soon serve, and some would be maimed or killed in that war. Not a particularly good now. As a consequence of that war, the coal-propelled British Empire began to shrink before the encroachment of the petroleum-powered U.S. empire in a time that would come to be called the American century. And a lot of young people sitting in the pews here in 1940 would serve and be maimed or killed in the next bloodiest war in human history. And in the long Cold War, and the next war, and the next war. As we begin this 103rd year of our congregational humanist experiment, U.S. world power is in rapid decline across the globe, and the flailing to regain power has exposed some things about American government that we have long ignored or kept hidden. So, here we are. The Buddhists and the existentialists both point out that every moment is the moment of decision. A moment of decision because we must live forward. Citizens of all nations spawned by European colonialism must now, I think, decide to go forward rather than clawing to get backward. Each citizen and each nation must decide to live either in nostalgia for how it used to be or how to live in the world now as it is. Which will that be? And what can we do now? I think now is a very exciting and hopeful place to be because perhaps at last we Americans can finally calm down and stop trying to prove something to the world or trying to impose something on the world. Our democracy isn't cleaner. Our capitalism isn't more efficient. Our science isn't more logical. Our Christianity isn't purer. Realizing those things, we can at last productively join the human family, I think. We can join with other progressive people on the planet as partners rather than would-be oppressors. Partners in nourishing people, nourishing living things, and in nourishing the planet itself. Becoming partners rather than oppressors is a worthy goal for the now that we live in. Though, for that to happen, we have got to change our way of thinking, and we really need to grow up a little bit. Do we live in nostalgia for a time lost, or do we strive to make this nation a contributing member of the world community and one that is safe for humanity, living things, and nature? Because here we are. Now, I don't want my little prophecy to be all that depressing, because I do see it as hopeful to realize where we are. And I think it's time for both Unitarian Universalism and the humanism that developed out of early 20th century Universalism and Unitarianism to change. It's time now. Both of those theological systems, Unitarian, Universalist, and Humanist, as they exist today, are rife with assumptions of American exceptionalism, European and American empire, racism, European superiority, and Christian exceptionalism. Now, hear what I'm saying. Christianity works when people work it. If it's your thread, hold on. But the truth of Christianity exists, I would claim, only in lived experience of the people who practice it. Unitarian Universalism works when you work it. But the truth of it exists only in the lived experience of the people holding on to that thread. So why talk about Christianity when we're talking about Unitarian Universalism or humanism? Well, the history of humanism and Unitarian Universalism is usually told, if you take a class, by a subtraction story, a subtraction narrative. That's how we understand all of these things backward. Universalists stopped believing in eternal punishment in hell. That was a Christian idea. Eternal punishment was subtracted, and then you had universalism. Unitarians stopped believing in the Trinity, then in the divinity of Jesus, then in the divine inspiration of the Bible. Subtraction, subtraction, subtraction from Christianity. Early 20th century humanists took it all a step further and stopped believing in the Christian God altogether. Subtraction. Minus, minus, minus equals, well, does it equal truth? Does that really make sense? I don't know that it does. How could purging the wrong ideas from one particular religion somehow lead to the truth? Now, first, who gets to decide what and how much gets subtracted? Is it the ministers? Is it the scholars? Is it the people in the pews? Do some people know more than other people? Why would that be, that some people know more than other people about how to live? Or is it all about power and influence? And can power and influence ever get at the truth? Secondly, why posit that Christianity, which is, after all, a relative newcomer on the world religious scene, how come it might somehow contain more truth to start taking out or more validity than, say, ancient Egyptian religious thought? Why would that be? When you think about it, privileging Christianity is an odd sort of geocentrism, because a particular strain of a particular religion came from a particular place and was successful in a particular place on the globe. So it must be true. That's odd, actually, when you stop to think about it. And the wrong answer is, my grandma believed it. Right? Why can't we find the truth by subtracting ideas from Zoroastrianism, which Rev. Wendy Jerome will be talking about next Sunday at 9:30 a.m.? Maybe that's the one to start subtracting from. No, subtraction is the wrong way to tell a story, but we understand backwards. Now, I'll repeat myself. Christianity works when people work it, when they hold on to that thread, and it's your thread. But the truth of Christianity exists only in the lived experience of the people who work it. Unitarian Universalism works when you work it, but the truth only exists in the lived experience of the people who are holding on to that thread. If you don't believe it, it doesn't work. And that's why most of us are in the room today. Something stopped working. If there's something that needs to be subtracted from all of this, I think it is the insistence that these and only these ideas are true and valid for human consumption. Everybody. Right now, at this moment, is the time for humanists to awaken, I think, to our true place on the planet. All of the world's peoples have created religion and philosophy and art in all the world's regions. I think even Antarctica, which ain't all that conducive to poetry, right? These creations are our human birthright. Further, I believe it is our obligation to respect the variety of cultural production, keeping an open mind to new ideas from all kinds of places as our planet shrinks. However, it is not our obligation to kowtow, and by the way, kowtow is an appropriated Chinese term. It's not our obligation to kowtow to the past. We do well to learn from the past, but we must live forward. Every person ever born has been born into a body, a social location, a culture, a geographical region, and on and on and on. No one on the planet has ever known all that much. Still, isn't it a worthy goal to attempt to think beyond all those limitations we're born into, grasping toward being a compassionate citizen of the world? That would mean working with addition rather than subtracting, adding rather than subtracting. We Westerners must learn that we do not exist for the purpose of ensuring the rights of white-splainers and mansplainers and pontificators. We exist to participate in and to facilitate conversation, open, compassionate, deep conversation. Be a humanist. Be a UU. Be a Christian. Be a Buddhist. Be a Sikh. Live some thread, but realize that its truth is a lived truth. It isn't true for everybody else. Our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person is not aimed toward creating a rampant and solipsistic individualism, even though that's what our culture says is best. Rather, we are about relationality, beginning in the assumption that every person and every culture and every belief system has inherent worth and dignity. From that place of compassion, then we can actually converse and relate with others. I think we must continually remind ourselves that humanist theory works from a naturalistic, evidence-based foundation, but that is not the sole property of European and European colonial ways of thinking. As a naturalist, materialist philosophy, humanism goes back to Taoist thought, as I mentioned last week, Confucian thought, Buddhist thought, Jain theology, Epicureanism, some African philosophies, and some schools of Hinduism, just to name a few. This is important to remember. Religious naturalists are part of an ancient global movement. In my view, it's important to understand that humanism is not atheistic, but a theistic, which doesn't make any sense, except that I want to say that we don't worry about the concept of deity as it figures into figuring out how to live in the world, what our commitments, what our morality and ethics ought to be, how we live our daily lives. We don't think that way, except maybe sometimes when we lose our keys, right? As I mentioned last week, Taoists taught that observing the creative universe and acting according to its observable laws will lead to a fulfilled life in community. Confucius argued that whether or not the gods exist, and he wasn't going to speculate, we must act with respect to all in order to realize our own humanity. The Buddha argued that whether or not the gods exist, our trouble is distinctly human, and the gods aren't going to help us. We are on our own. Epicurus argued that whether or not the gods exist, they don't appear to interact with human reality. So, we're on our own. The great Hindu philosopher Ajita Kisakambali, I believe is how you say it, from something around 600 BCE, founded the Charvaka movement in Hinduism in India. He argued that the logical end of totalizing of Brahman, of God, if everything is God, then nothing is God. So, let's go with observable reality. That's what we've got to work with. Humanist thought follows these time-honored traditions. It's not that humanists don't relish speculating about the deities and even maybe praying to one or another of them when we lose our keys. It's merely that we don't speculate about them when we consider ethics and morality, because that's human stuff. We work from the assumption that we humans are on our own. Humanism must consciously join into the ancient and worldwide movement that it's actually part of. In this case, we understand backward into too short a time. Christianity just wasn't that long ago. Forget European and American exceptionalism. This is old. So here we are. What's happening at First Unitarian Society right now? Well, you're what is happening, you and we as a community. That's what's happening. After assembly today, head downstairs for our involvement fair. Get involved. Do what makes you come alive. Are you a nurturer at heart? Well, right now, they're cooking up a warm meal for you, and you can help cook it, you can help serve it. We do it every week after our Sunday assembly. So go do some nurturing. Go forth and peel potatoes. Are you good with tech? We had over 6,000 interactions with people on our Facebook page last week. That's quite a lot. The more of our talks and our classes and our discussions that we get online, the more interaction we get from a wider and wider audience who hear our message. We are the largest humanist gathering in the world. Go forth in tech and get that word out. Are you a teacher at heart? We have book groups, discussion groups, all sorts of groups to lead or sing. You can knit, you can sing. Go forth and create. Direct action, systemic change. We're working on both of those justice issues right now. Next Sunday at noon, Rev Kelly will be talking about the initiatives we have coming up this year. We live forward, but we understand backward. So honoring this congregation's unique leadership and a woman's right to choose, right? Right now, we're engaged in a lawsuit and joining with Unrestrict Minnesota. Right now, we're leaders in the struggle for legislation to legalize medical aid in dying in this state. And you can walk right downstairs this morning and communicate directly with your elected officials through our Active Voices group. Go forth and create justice today. Do you enjoy working with kids? Help make our religious education program the strongest in the Twin Cities. Our approach, studying and respecting religious and philosophical traditions without pushing or privileging any of them, that's the future of humanity. And it builds respect for others while empowering self-awareness. Go forth and teach. And the list goes on, as you will see in a few moments downstairs. We live forward, but we understand backward. Yeah, it's a true description of the human condition. But the fact need not lead to paralysis. If we hope to build a better world, we must stop doing things the way they've always been done. Because understanding backward isn't enough. We got to go forth and do the job at hand. Late in his life, that philosopher Martin Heidegger came to the conclusion that being itself, occurs only between people. As that's phrased in an African form of humanism called Ubuntu, I am because we are. I am because we are. Awakening from the dream of the past is not enough. We must also awake to our power in the moment now and strive to be present with each other and the world as we each experience it, as we each hold on to some thread. So here we are. Our call is to wake up and grow up, to embrace the human family, and working with others to save our burning world.